While questions are building around whether Republican Congress members helped plan the protest and attack on the U.S. Capitol. Chris Pickle in our newsroom with more on that. Chris?
And Jared, we are now talking about Representatives Paul Gosar and Andy Biggs. Ironically, we discovered they co-sponsored a bill that would increase penalties for the same actions some claim they were involved in at the Capitol.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Intended to punish participants of left-wing demonstrations, a GOP-backed bill would also end up increasing prison sentences for actions like the attack on Capitol Hill. The BRICS Act was introduced in November. It increases penalties for inciting, organizing, or funding riots. Prison sentences would go from the current 5 years up to 10 years. 25 years if there is serious bodily injury, life in prison if someone is killed. Billed as a way to stop the violence perpetuated by the far left, 20 Republican Congress members co-signed the act. Representative Debbie Lesko tweeting, "We must hold anarchist groups like Antifa accountable for the violence and destruction." Two other co-sponsors of the bill, Arizona Representatives Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar, are now under growing scrutiny for their suspected roles in the violent protests on Capitol Hill.
I was the person who came up with the January 6th idea with Congressman Gosar, Congressman Mo Brooks, and then Congressman Andy Biggs.
Far-right activist Ali Alexander, one of the event organizers, says the group planned to use the crowd to overturn the Democratic election.
We schemed up of putting maximum pressure on Congress while they were voting so that who we couldn't lobby, we could change the hearts and the minds of Republicans who were in that body hearing our loud war from outside.
Multiple tweets by Congressman Gosar show he was working with Alexander, including, "I will be in D.C. with Ali and the rest of America. We will fight back against the leftists who engaged in sedition." Representative Biggs did not return our request for an interview, but a spokesperson told the Washington Post Congressman Biggs is not aware of hearing of or meeting Mr. Alexander at any point, let alone working with him to organize some part of a planned protest. The BRICS Act has not been passed and laws are not retroactive. Stronger penalties would only apply to future riots, regardless of the political motivation. Is it possible to punish one political group but not another?
The scales of justice are supposed to be balanced in a fair and impartial way. Whether you live on the right of our political spectrum or on the left of our political spectrum, we as citizens are supposed to be able to expect that justice will be delivered impartially and based upon the facts, not upon our political views.
Paul Charlton is a former U.S. attorney. We asked him about new reports lawmakers may have been working directly with groups who plan to storm the Capitol. There are now reports that congressional members were giving tours, reconnaissance tours of the Capitol the day before the riot. If that is true, could congressional members face charges?
Did those individuals know and have an understanding that they were leading those tours to assist and promote the violence that would take place the next day? Unless you can prove that to be true, there's no crime. On the other hand, if there's something more sinister about the way those tours were taking place, that's something I expect law enforcement and prosecutors will look at very carefully.
And according to Mr. Charlton, there are obstacles when it comes to investigating members of Congress. First, a prosecutor has to get permission from the U.S. Attorney General for the investigation. And when it comes to inciting violence, a prosecutor would have to make sure whatever was said was not protected by free speech. So they have to prove there was intent to incite, and that can be a very difficult obstacle for prosecutors. Jared?